When BenQ mentioned they've got a new 4K HDR monitor on the market, I was very much intrigued to put it through its paces. Here, the EW2780U indeed is a 4K HDR monitor, but also has USB Type-C connectivity. Now, the monitor can be found for around £450 in the UK and $500 in the US, which is a pretty steep asking price, given some of its competitors are not only cheaper, but if you take USB Type-C out of the equation, then you might be saving yourself pretty much half the cost of the monitor. Nevertheless, the locally link in the description below will take you to your localized Amazon store, and also down in the description you'll find some alternative suggestions that you might want to consider. Now, before jumping into this review, I'd very much appreciate a follow on Instagram and Twitter if you do use those social media platforms, and furthermore, if you're interested in all electric or hybrid news or reviews, do check out Totally EV. Your support would be equally appreciated. Now, to kick things off, let me give you a quick glance of the overall specs of the monitor. It's 4K HDR monitor, has an IPS panel that runs at 60 Hz and has a quoted response time of 5 milliseconds. It's also got two HDMI 2.0 ports, a singular DisplayPort 1.4 input, and of course USB Type-C. Now, the Type-C input will also deliver 60 watts of power to your laptop, for example, so you can charge and use the monitor at the same time if you have a compatible laptop. Now, moving past that, you've also got a 3.5mm headphone jack for you to output audio via headphones, and also stereo 5-watt speakers. Now, here it's not something normally that I would really kind of shout about on a monitor, having reviewed in excess of 175 different panels, but I must say the one on this BenQ are really pretty much class leading, not only in terms of the overall tonality that you get, in terms of the overall sound quality that you get, but also in terms of their power output and how they are very much tailored in terms of the preset EQs. So here BenQ have really done a fantastic job. So if you're looking to do some basic editing or indeed music watching or movie watching via the built-in speakers of the monitor, then these will pretty much be one of the best that you can find on the market. Of course, if you have the money and the budget, I would always suggest bookshelf speakers and DAC headphones instead. But if you do want to kind of declutter your setup, then built-in speakers of this particular monitor are really incredible. Now, what isn't so impressive is the stand that BenQ have included. Given this monitor's price range, I was expecting a fully fledged adjustable stand, and unfortunately that's not the case. You've just got a flimsy plastic stand which provides you only a tilt adjustment. I think BenQ really should have done a better job in this domain, specifically at the target market for those people who are interested in ergonomics, and let alone that, just the overall price tag of this monitor really should deserve a fully adjustable stand. If you do want to replace it, you can do so via 100x100 VESA stand, so you can plug in your own, let's say, monitor arm or like multi-monitor setup, but it still would have been nice for those people who want to run a single monitor setup with the built-in stand to have better ergonomics at their disposal out of the box. On a more positive note, the stand does look aesthetically pleasing, and the monitor is treated with a 3-side borderless design with a slight edge at the bottom bezel with the BenQ symbol. There's also a little kind of, not say a little display, but a little sensor which is poised at the front, and that is to do with the eye care sensor, which is ultimately trying to reduce blue light by looking at the ambient light in your room and indeed adjusting on the fly with the color temperature of the monitor. So now we get onto the monitor's OSD that can be accessed through a joystick button found at the bottom right of the monitor. Now, the OSD is pretty comprehensive and easy to understand. So in the picture mode, you've got the brightness, contrast, sharpness, advanced, and super resolution and smart focus. In the color section, you've got the different color modes. It's slightly weird not to see an sRGB mode, and we'll get onto this in just a bit. You've got the HDR modes, which can also be accessed through the button, the physical button found at the front of the monitor, and then you've got different color temperature modes as well. Again, weird not to see the sRGB mode. Then you've got advanced, where the most important one for gamers will be the AMA. We'll get onto this in just a bit, but this is really not a gaming monitor. Then you've got the audio settings, and as I mentioned, the actual different level of EQs that you've got are pretty impressive, to say the least, and the actual speakers themselves, the downward firing speakers, are very impressive. One of the best I've heard on a built-in monitor. Then you've got the eye care, and this is to do with the sensor found at the front of the monitor. So you've got the BI Plus, eye reminder, and low blue mode as well, which you can adjust. If you were to adjust this mode over here, it will overwrite the picture mode as well, so worth bearing in mind. And if you've got the custom keys, which you can change, range in terms of what they are, and then the system, which is pretty much self-explanatory. The most important thing is you can switch off the LED indicator, which is found at the bottom right of the monitor. And now let's get on to the most important part, the image quality. Now first off, in terms of its sRGB standard, uncalibrated out the box, it scores 99.3% in sRGB gamut coverage, and in terms of gamut volume, it's 111.4%. Now while these figures might seem pretty good, it is worth bearing in mind that it is overzealous in terms of its yellowish green tones and in terms of its dark blues, and therefore isn't actually quite as color accurate as it might seem. If you put it through a color calibrator, such as the Datacolor SpiderX Elite, then you'll find that the average delta-E is 1.12 and a maximum of 3.36. Now, while these figures are perfectly acceptable, for a monitor of its price, I was actually expecting slightly better results. I found gaming monitors out there to actually have better results than this. Nevertheless, they're perfectly acceptable. In terms of contrast ratio, given it's an IPS panel, I wasn't expecting the world, but it's slightly disappointing to see 971 contrast ratio. I was expecting around 1200 or the 1100 mark, so just a slight improvement would have been very much appreciated. Now all of this is very much important to know, because if you're getting this monitor, you're probably looking into picture or video grading, and in this respect the monitor isn't quite hitting the sRGB standard as it really should do. And furthermore, there's no real excuse because it's not a gaming monitor or anything like that, and it's pretty much a pretty expensive 4K 60Hz monitor. So anyway, I was just expecting a little bit better here from BenQ, and it's a shame not to see those results kind of coming through. Now similarly over here, the brightness is capped at around 350 nits. I recorded around 336 nits with my color calibrator with a minimum brightness of 40 nits, and that's perfectly fine, but when you do have HDR, you're going to expect much better results. And it came to no surprise that when I did lob an HDR sort of signal, in other words I was putting some Destiny 2 on my Windows PC, I found that the HDR performance was lackluster to say the least, and that's really because the monitor doesn't even hit the display HDR 400 standard, which is laughable in itself. I was expecting over here with an HDR 4K monitor, given one it's kind of poised towards editors and those people who want to use it as a color editing monitor, to have at least HDR 600, in other words over 600 nits or above, would have been really much appreciated and something that would have set this monitor aside from some of its competitors. I was also slightly disheartened to find that the brightness uniformity wasn't really that great throughout the panel, namely at the top right of my panel. Now of course this is going to be complete panel lottery, but of course this is an IPS panel, and those people looking to edit specifically in the evening might find that the backlight bleed is a little bit unacceptable for a monitor of its class. Now again, if this was a gaming monitor and it had loads of bells and whistles going for it, then I'd be perfectly fine with it. But as this is a 4K 60Hz monitor, which is really aimed at editors or people who want to be using this for a more professional type of workspace, again, I was a little bit disappointed at the overall performance that I got from this BenQ monitor. Now, as for gaming, this isn't a gaming monitor in the slightest, as I've mentioned throughout this review, and it's no surprise that the 60Hz is going to kind of let you down. Even the response time of the monitor wasn't that great. Although I will say the input lag was pretty impressive, and even with the AMA dialed up to the maximum amount, there's very little inverse ghosting to be seen. In a game like Counter-Strike, you won't notice it at all. If you go on something a little bit more intensive, such as Destiny 2, then you'll notice a little bit of purple hazing in the background. But it's perfectly acceptable, and I must say here, in this domain, BenQ have done a good job. So this all leads me on to my verdict, and truthfully, you can pretty much see where I'm going with this. I don't really think this BenQ monitor is worth the extra premium that you'll be paying over some of its competitors. Yes, it's got USB Type-C input, but that's really the only thing going for it at its price range. If you look elsewhere, you can find monitors without USB Type-C input for around £200, $200 less than this BenQ monitor, which is a significant amount of money. And I know prices will fluctuate, and I'm sure in about a year's time this monitor will be a lot cheaper and therefore a lot more affordable, and therefore my opinion might change in terms of that. But at this time of making this video, I just think it's just too expensive for what it's offering, and specifically given its HDR performance is lackluster, the image quality could be bettered, its stand is pretty poor, and also its gaming credentials are not really there because it's not really aimed for gamers. The only real thing that I was really blown away by was actually its stereo speakers, and that's not really something you should really be shouting about if it's a monitor, because ultimately you're not going to buy a monitor for its sound quality, you're going to be buying it for its picture quality, and in this respect I think BenQ could have done a better job. But that's just my honest review and thoughts about the monitor. Let me know in the comments below what you make of it. Of course, if you like this review, give it a like, subscribe to see more, and of course favorite and share if you feel this will give a family or friend an informed buying decision. I've been Totally Dubbed, take care and bye bye.